Just the content. So. Okay, just a quick plug for our monthly dinner event in December. So this will be in 2 weeks. We're happy to welcome Mr. Ron Smith, a senior physicist, MIT alum, who will be providing a presentation on how we can support the future of AI. This will be a presentation followed by a fireside chat on quantum computing. So what you'll hear a lot from Henry today is more the art of the possible with AI, and then we'll follow that up with our December session focused on like what we need in terms of the back end and the technical investment uh, to support that. We'll also continue our tradition of the holiday toy drive, so stay tuned via newsletters. We've already got a lot of registrations, and most of all, it's a $10 holiday special. So continue to thank you for your membership. And yep, welcome to everyone. So we're very honored to welcome Mr. Henry Carbajales to our chapter stage virtually today. He's currently a senior tech builder for ProtonCon. For those who have been chapter members for a while, we've had a good partnership with Montgomery College. He's one of the technology professors and instructors there, providing instruction from everything to Gen AI, which we'll hear about today, to data analytics, to visualizations of those analytics, and then Python programming as well. He has his master's in geospatial information systems.
Hear you.
Is that better? Okay. Well-decorated Marine Corps veteran and one of the best dancers you'll meet in your life. So we're very happy to welcome Henry to our stage, and we'll turn it over to him to present.
Yep. I'm sorry, Matt. If you said a lot of nice things, thank you, but I literally missed the entire thing. I was like, why is... Folks, the more we rely on technology, the more sometimes I feel our life is getting more difficult. With that being said, am I up?
Yep, sure are. So if you want to share your screen, and the floor is yours, sir.
Awesome. Screen one. Sure. All right. And then the final check. Folks can see my screen as well.
Yep, sure can.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody, or depending where you're calling from around the world. My name is Henry Carbajales. Thank you for joining me. So today, what I want to talk about is transforming ideas into reality through the lens when it comes to generative AI. So let's get started. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. I'll begin with a little bit about myself, my background, what I've done. Then want to jump right into the topic at hand, which will be one, what goes through the process, or how does one create ideas for your organization in terms of leveraging Gen AI technologies, right? Sometimes the ideation process can be very difficult. So I want to talk about some ways that you can get started within your organization. Then I'm going to talk about factors to consider when assembling your team. We all are seeing probably job descriptions about wanting 5-10+ years of Gen AI experience, where some of the technology that's released is only 2 years old, right? There's things to just consider when it comes to assembling your team. It's not so far-fetched that you need someone that has Gen AI experience per se. So I'll cover some of those things, as well as give you an example overview of the team that I worked in at a Fortune 500 company to just kind of paint you the picture of what that team looked like. Last but not least, will be just some final thoughts to consider once you're done, right? I think when you are working in engagement and you finish your product, your deliverable, your solution, we tend to forget that the journey still continues on with our clients, especially everyone being here may have experience with project management, right? So you kind of know that there's more to it than fulfilling your deliverable, right? There's always that next chapter. And then last but not least, we'll set some time for some Q&A. I'll try my best to answer those questions. If not, I'll do some homework over the weekend to ensure I give you my best approach or answer to what I couldn't answer to in this call. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I mentioned before, Henry Carbajales, I'm founder of ProtonCon LLC, an independent consultant. I like to really refer to myself as a technologist by trade. I am a veteran-owned business, entering in the government commercial space, government consulting space, as well as the commercial. University of Maryland is my alma mater. I was in the United States Marine Corps for 8 years, and this being a PMI event, I do have my PMP, which was a painstaking process to obtain, Scrum Master, as well as most recently the AWS AI Practitioner certification, which was in their beta a few weeks ago. So I was able to pass that. Not as easy as one may think, but with due time, a lot of the things will become memory. Some of my past clients, I've been doing consulting for 10 years. So it's a divide between commercial and federal. So in the DC area, from USAID, FDA census, to the commercial side, your pharmaceuticals and real estate investment companies. The gambit of activities has been varied from digital transformation solutions, implementing ServiceNow, Appian, to creating cloud automated processes that perform the redundant task of data gathering, cleaning, to in the hopes of providing the latest and greatest in reporting. Most recently, in these last 4 years, it's been pivoted most heavily in cloud technologies. And then within the last 2 years, I would say when the moment ChatGPT came out to the public, I really dived deep into that space just because of the amazement of what it can do, the way it simplifies things. And I'll cover some of those things too, as well as we talk about use cases and creating those use cases and how to categorize those use cases so that it's more ingestible to comprehend in your organization. So to begin, most often I hear things about how do I create a product using Gen AI? That's really an open-ended question in terms of its broadness, right? We are all, or some of us here, are project managers. So you need to really kind of hone in on it. Not that open-ended questions are terrible per se, but sometimes it can be boiling the ocean when it comes to what we're trying to do. So another way of viewing is how can we leverage Gen AI to improve the product or the thing that you're working on right now, right? Other ways of looking at it from an open-ended lens is, what are some innovative ways to use Gen AI to create like new products or services in your domain area? Then the next question that will come to all of us is, how do I begin? And that's what I am hoping to address here is even if these questions don't come to mind, it's giving you a way to go about thinking how to get to those use cases and what the process is overall. So fundamentally, I believe that there's 4 general phases when it comes to inception to prototype, right? You have your use case, you have your identifying governance, followed by developing your idea, and then your initial pilot, what gets released to a small subset, right? So when it comes to the use case ideation, it's brainstorming of something that you want to conceptualize that will eventually enhance your organization. Identifying governance is going to be a requirement, folks, right? I can't stress, and I know everyone here has seen and in news the dangers and pitfalls of how Gen AI can damage in certain cases an organization if not used or not used effectively, but also not have established proper guardrails. Then the next process is really developing, and I'll cover about what that means with the team and what to consider, and then the release of the pilot. Right, there are many things that you can consider when it comes to the initial pilot, but I'm going to talk about more on what should you look out for once you are approaching that end of engagement, right? Where do you want to proceed next, and just a couple of things to keep in mind in terms of that. So how do I come up with an idea? I'm not an idea person, folks. I think I have somewhat of an innovative, creative mindset, but even I struggle to come up with something organic and revolutionary, right? But overall, there's three things that I see as opportunities for you to be able to create um, use cases, right? So from left to right, it's from smallest to, I guess, at the highest strategic level, right? So at the business level, I'm talking about your individual teams, right? Like your project manager, your development team, your marketing team, your finance team. In some cases, more so in the commercial sector, right? I've seen organizations where their IT shop would give your team access to, let's say, AWS, right? And it is up to you within that team to manage access controls and budgeting and paying for the costs associated to leveraging the resources. If you have that capability, that is a good opportunity for you to leverage ways of enhancing what you're doing with Gen AI technologies. Enable creativity if you're using, let's say, like the Agile framework. Uh, Create new stories that will enable you to test drive developing Gen AI features, from summarizations to image generations, things of that nature, right? That is a great opportunity for the team level. Obviously, about all things considering uh, scope and level of effort in terms of other engagements that may be impeding, but you do have the opportunity to test drive certain features. Unfortunately, from a government perspective, that may not be the case, right? Because they do tend to put things under lock and key very strictly. But that leads me to the next area, right? Which is the enterprise. We've all heard of Game Shark, right? Or sorry, not Game Shark, Shark Tank. And you go in, you pitch your idea, and you have a panel of judges determining whether they want to invest in your company or not. You can apply the same thing as well here, right? I've seen organizations where that's what exactly they did, where they are aware and bought in to the benefit of generative AI and its technologies. And so they opened up a Shark Tank type of engagement where every team, every department, every individual has the opportunity to submit an idea. Obviously, this is more than just submitting an idea. There are probably also some restrictions to take into consideration, right? So from a judging perspective, right, to kind of help gauge uh, which ideas you should proceed, there are a couple of factors, excuse me, to take into consideration. One being, the impact. Is it improving efficiencies, reducing cost, preventing risk? Another factor is reach. Are you supporting more people across the enterprise, right? At the same time, another factor to take into consideration is feasibility, right? And the thing is, feasibility should be limited to the enterprise itself. And I'll give you some timeline. I'll give you a timeline towards when I talk about the team on how long that should be. I don't want to spoil that for folks. And then the last but not least is actually dedicating R&D dollars to this engagement, because it does cost money, right? As we look into the team dynamics, I do kind of cover things to consider when it comes to building Gen AI solutions, right? We all say, oh, I can create a model, but do you really know what that means? And so I will be talking about that, and I'll show you why cost can be a very deterring factor. And so I think that at the strategic level of an organization, they need to understand that they need to provide some type of funding in some shape or another, right? Depending on that, it can give people an idea of how long things can take. The last approach you can take, this can vary depending where you're at, and that's why I try to cover from the lowest level to the highest level, depending where folks here in this call are located, is at the executive level. I've always heard of design thinking, but I can't stress enough how right now I think design thinking, it is a great tool for you to use. It really helps put thoughts on paper. So anybody here that is a design thinking pro, SME, lean in on that, right? Because it really answers a lot of the unknowns. And at every level of these, and when I speak with any client or any team, it always comes down to me meeting them at where they're at, because certain organizations are further ahead than others. A design thinking can kind of help you gauge where people are at, right? It's definitely imperative that you gather leaders of various departments, because everyone has a different stake. We've all heard legal, IT, et cetera, et cetera. But I've seen where we've done design thinking sessions, but the IT personnel isn't there. And that matters, because they have the final say whether or not technology can be approved for use, which can then impact what technologies maybe people can submit in their Shark Tank engagement, right? So definitely take that into consideration when you're doing design thinking. You get way more value bringing more diverse groups of people than those limited within one area. Preferably, right, my favorite is the green rock. That's why I put a check mark in there, because it exposes you to the thoughts of everybody in your organization. And I had the privilege of having access to the results of all the submissions, and I'll cover like how I view these submissions to kind of help gauge anybody here that's thinking of doing that, what to look for and how to kind of bucket them for the most part. The blue dot is referencing governance, right? These are moments where you need to start thinking about governance in some shape or another, right? Obviously, it is going to include enhancing or updating whatever policy you have, but then also referencing new policies that are relatively new. Like, for example, the AI Act that I believe finally came into law in the UK, but also the AI risk management framework from NIST. There are also other frameworks as well that you can use from larger corporations that have that technical background experience, and they all warranted and valid in their own rights. It's just a matter of what works for you. There is a trend that most of these frameworks apply a risk mindset, a risk approach in terms of if it leaves you to do X, Y risks that impacts this organization at this level, don't do this, right? Sometimes you may need to say, you know what, these are the standards of flows of how we're going to manage data to minimize these risks. It doesn't really go into the details, but it gives you a guiding sense for the most part. So those are just the three ways that I've seen work effectively. If you are trying to come up with ways to present new opportunities or business opportunities, or how to introduce of getting started with creating use cases using generative AI, right? So you have the business level at the individual team, you have the enterprise gamification, and then at the end, executive level, you have design thinking. So to kind of give you an example of why I'm a big fan of design thinking is because it provided a aha moment in one of the sessions I was involved with, where in this group, we had a mixture of directors, ITs, customers, and other departments that required IT services, and just groups from different departments. One of the activities we had was, if you had all the data, what questions would you ask? Right? You will take 5-10 minutes, give everybody stickies, and they just start writing everything. And man, do people write. You'll have a facilitator go in and try to group questions that are relatively similar, cluster affinity mapping, right? Uh, after some time, right, you go and proceed and ask the second question, right? So, coming back to reality, right? What data are you missing? So the first question is giving them the freedom of anything. The second question is what's preventing that liberty of you asking what questions you have. And again, 5-10 minutes and you start seeing people write things that they're missing, things that they want, that they don't know if it exists. And these two questions do two things, which is a benefit to all project managers, right? Especially when we're wanting to enhance the business. Is one, the first question identifies the want of the client, customer, or sponsor leader, right? What is it that do they want? The second question tells you what they need. One of the things that design thinking does is most often, I don't know if this is just a standard, but most often is you tend to create a roadmap. Well, now you have what they want and what they need, and now you can more clearly create what that pathway will look like, gauging the level of difficulty. And this is just one session, folks, right? Design thinking can be something between a single day to multiple days. It depends on the need of the group of people, right? Not everyone is familiar with Gen AI. Not everyone is familiar maybe with the agile methodology. And during those sessions is a great time to provide some training and education so that you bring everyone to the same playing field. So I just can't stress enough, but design thinking is a great way of really understanding what your customers are wanting and needing, and then being able to design an approach to kind of get them there. So I talked about categorization and bucketing things, right? You've gone through the process of creating use cases, but what does that mean to me? During one exercise with a fellow colleague, I was just reviewing an organization's collections of use cases, and I noticed a trend, right? I can't say I coined this categorization wholeheartedly. I think I may have seen it somewhere, but overall, a lot of these use cases fall under one of these buckets. It could be more, it could be less, right? But I believe these are the general 5 buckets that all use cases fall under. At the lowest end, right, is your business process improvements. And we see this now, right? Those that have access to Copilot or any GPT embedded within their emails or Word docs, you are leveraging a business process improvement use case, right? I, for one, folks, I am terrible with emails. I think it used to take me over 30 minutes just to write a single 2-sentence email because of, am I misspelling something? Am I being too aggressive? Am I asking an action out of this message? But now that with clients, I get to use GPT within my email. I like how it is now able to take what I wrote and make it better, clear, and in sync with a dedicated action, right? So that I know I am requesting something versus just giving you a generic message that just goes beyond the wayside. As a technical person, it really helps me in code development, right? It helps me take what I know and then asking like, hey, can you make it more efficient so that it enhances performance and response so that an end user knows that when they click on the button, it loads in less than a second. On the extreme side, and why I specifically just highlighted these two is because on the extreme side, I would say these last 3 months, 4-ish months, all I see and hear are AI agents. And they're great, right? They are the enhancements of virtual assists, right? Eventually, virtual assists back in the day, I think Clippy was back. If folks knew about Clippy and Word, I believe that was a form of a virtual assist. But fast forward, In recent times before, Gen AI, they were just a collection of statements that it was just looking at certain words and then giving you the response. Then a predefined response. Then GPTs came around, and now they're giving you response with more feeling, more personable, right? But there were some limits there, right? It can only do so much. And if you've been catching on the news, we've all heard about that one company that was a person was able to sell a car for $1, right? Well, now you have agents, right? And this is supposed to mimic various personas working in tandem. So that it's just not one thing, but it is a collection of, let's say, a help desk coordinating with policies of access control agent, coordinating with the final approval that are you allowed to communicate this response to an end user, right? And then sending that response back, right? So agents are very complex. I, for one, am not a master of agents because it is just a collection of new techniques and processes that I'm just not really quite familiar yet. Eventually, over time, I will get it right. Over time, as technology changes and updates, it will become easier, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that. Whereas technology changes, adapt, it becomes easier with example use case, a demo of something I created, which paled income, which is not paled, but did better than what I did before because of what technology is offering. Then everything in between is just adding on to what you already have from a data perspective, right? On this, if you're looking at the second block on the left, it's helping you with data wrangling process. Again, going back to Copilot, if you use Excel with it, you'll see it'll give you recommendations. From a technical perspective, it's just adding in another step that uses Gen AI to do something with your record that you're processing, employee record or HR record, in addition to everything else. Analytics, right? It's providing you recommendations and insights that you would not normally maybe not have found. Analytics and business process improvement tend to kind of work hand in hand, right? If you are familiar with BI tools, business intelligence tools like Tableau or Power BI, you know that they've embedded Gen AI capabilities in there where it can give you some recommendations, suggestions, verbiage on the data that you're seeing, right? So it's just enhancing the ability to interpret the visualization better, faster, and more efficiently. Automation, as I mentioned before, with the virtual assists, but anything else that can take off can ease work from an employee. It's just another great way. Why that is a little higher is because you are assuming a certain type of risk in terms of, okay, I did automate this approval. Is it going to be right 100% of the time? Things of that nature. And obviously, we all hear human in the loop. Totally get that. And so that's why complexity raises a little bit. At what point or what metrics does it warrant a human in a loop versus something that doesn't need a human in a loop because it's just a tried and true deterministic data element that isn't left to ambiguity. It's either yes or no, and then your system will know what to do from that point. And so overall, these are the processes to take into consideration when it comes to creating use cases for your organization at the business, enterprise, and executive level, from especially leveraging at the executive level design thinking and giving you an example of a great question activity to do, followed by showing you, okay, you've collected all these use cases. So what? Okay, how do I ingest all this information into something more manageable, right? Do you want to address your low-hanging fruit, or do you want to address, the most difficult thing you have, given the level of effort and complexities, right? And so with agents, I can't stress enough, it's just more of so many systems are talking to each other now. Not systems, but more so models, maybe. Models, maybe both actually, and or both, right? You have systems, models just connecting with each other and ensuring that your flows and processes are referring or coordinating as designed, that somebody like one model one agent, isn't just bypassing the approval agent and is going straight to draft agent to ensure that the message is clear, is concise, and it meets policy guidelines, right? And that's what I mean by complexity. It's just navigating, people talking to each other. How do you navigate like physical world people talking to each other in a virtual sense? Question.
Yep. Great commentary. In terms of the soft side of change with virtual personas, I think 5 years ago we all know people or ourselves, in terms of phone bots would just say representative or press zero or whatever we had to do to talk to a real
Mm-hmm.
person.
Yep.
How do you think that's evolved so far in this decade, and what's still needed to get all generations to buy into more virtual assistants openness, I guess?
Mm-hmm. It's the reliability, right? Before they were just generic, they sounded robotic, right? So as I mentioned earlier, virtual assistants enable more of a personal touch, right? If you're talking to a bot, as we knew it back in the day, it was just please press one, right? Please press your ID number, your name, and then it'll give you more information, right? So now, fast forward to the day, right? A system can now pull your information once you've provided your ID number or your phone number. It can then do those checks as a conversation. It's like, oh, hey, Henry, I see that you are back. Can you please provide and punch in this code to confirm that this is you? Okay, great. How may I help you? So the ability to make it more personal. The second thing is the advancement of the technology to be able to respond in that quick manner. You can press one, but then how many seconds does it take for it to go to the next prompt, the next menu, right? I think it's something along, you lose somebody after the first 3 seconds. If it's not showing loading a screen, you lose them. If anybody saw the release of ChatGPT 4.0 as they were having dialogue conversations, it was very instant, right? It was seamless. I could at moments very little tell that it was an AI generated voice responding to the information it received, right? To think about like it's processing that audio, converting it into a format where it is then interpreting it through a model, spitting out its results, and then saying its results to you in a voice, which is amazing. Recently, I did post like on LinkedIn, for example, a Kaggle generative AI intensive course I completed. And what's great, what Kaggle did is they have white papers and they used AI to kind of mimic a conversational podcast of that white paper, which was very well done. After a while, you do hear some of the nuances of that may annoy people to a degree, but that is amazing. You couldn't do that back in the day, pre generative, pre GPTs, and even maybe like 2 years ago, right? It wasn't quite there, or maybe it was a little bit slower, or the efficiency on how people definitely gotta look at, like, I can geek out on this all day, where it was like seamless. However, it was too perfect. So as I was listening, I was like, people usually always overstep over each other. Like, I think that's a common thing because we as people just don't know when to stop and then have somebody else begin, right? Sometimes you have that, oh, you go, right? But it's just amazing on where it's going. Hopefully, Matt, that answers the questions, or anybody that was curious on that. I think that it's just going to get better and better and better for the most part.
Yep. Thank you.
So the next thing is, okay, so I have my use cases. How do I form the team, right? I just want to level set here, folks. I see the open internet. I see some of these job descriptions. Hopefully, it's not you, right? Where they want a Gen AI developer that's been doing this for 5, 10 years. And under these requirements, they list technologies. And some of these technologies and capabilities did not exist, right? It's kind of disheartening because it's like, okay, what do you want? There's no one that would have this capability, right? Example of that is Anybody here heard LangChain, right? They are I think they are an application Gen AI provider. They were the first, kudos to whoever this team is. They were the first to develop a framework that combined three things. One, your data, right? Which led to development of retrieval augmented generation, right? Two, the model, whatever that may be. And three, the prompt, i.e. prompt engineering. And so they created this open source uh, software that allowed you to connect those three things. And this came out October 2022, right? Amazing. And I think because of that, which was developed in Python, it now like makes Python number one. And from since then till now, of all the training I've taken, they always reference LangChain. All right, well, I don't use LangChain. Hey, why do I care? All right, databases is your thing. Well, part of what makes generative AI function is the way of how they transform your data into numerical lists that is a representation, numbers that are representation of your data. That would then allows it to operate more efficiently. They refer to it as embeddings or vectors. However, they can't. There is a difference between the two, but for simplicity, we'll just keep them as two of the same thing. Well, earlier in 2022, there wasn't really much technologies that allowed you to store this type of data that a large language model could use, right? PostgreSQL is one of the most popular open source databases out there. A lot of companies have that underneath the hood, if you didn't know. And it wasn't until 2021 did they enabled a feature to store these vectors embeddings, right? So again, a lot of this technology is relatively new. A lot of people just do not know. But in general, and what I like to tell folks is that you got to see Gen AI as a layer. That's really what it is. It's just a layer. It's not something new. Is there a science to a degree? Is there a science to it? Yes. If you're developing like a whole model, yes, that itself is a discipline. But again, developing a model, well, data scientists, ML engineers, they're not doing anything different. They're just taking these new types of ways of creating a model to create what we know as GPTs or whatever the works that may be. So to a degree, it is just a layer and add on to what you already know. And what I mean by that is, I gave you three positions here that are close to the positions that we had in a Gen AI project that I will share in the next slide, right? So you have your prompt engineers, but to a degree, they have software developer skill sets, right? Where they're leveraging a programming language, they're doing prompt developing. All that is just configuring your data to be able to pick the right elements within it to be able to provide the prompt that you needed to, in addition to the data, right? It's no different than what people have been doing before. They're just doing it for something different with a couple changes in the semantics and the syntax. The new thing is AI and the Gen AI technology and the framework, right? Having an understanding of what those are, right, is key. But overall, everything else above was relatively something a person that is a software engineer background could already do, right? Then you have your ML ops. And I think I also lump in cloud engineers in there as well, right? There's a bit of overlap depending on the team size, right? Where you're there managing your infrastructure. They call that infrastructure as code, standing up your dedicated code repository, standing up your deployment timeline, standing up the environment, code collaboration environment, right? The additional thing, and I think as I'm looking at this slide that I should have done is budgeting. I think folks really need to monitor budgeting very closely, because you can spend a lot of money, and I'll go over on just give you an idea on cost to a degree, right? But the newer thing that they're adding on as, again, the layer is just understanding Gen AI technology, right? I mentioned a couple technologies that are brand new, and there's just more being developed. Data scientist, data analyst, right? Well, one of the things that they need to be familiar with is just large language models. They already know programming language, right? So it's understanding what large language models are, understanding their purposes, their benefits, and all of those natures. Understanding Gen AI frameworks, retrieval augmented generation, right? The process of, instead of referencing the model itself to leverage its internally trained data, it can go and reach out to a source and use that as a mechanism of responding to your request. That's what it means. Retrieve, then you augment, and then you generate that information, right? But collaborate, establishing a collaboration environment, they've done that. Creating, deploying models and managing those models, they've done that. Maybe they need to do it a little bit more with a finer comb, because you need to measure what people input into these models, and also analyze what is generated, right? Then look at what you are using as your prompts, and then doing those tests to see how those things are impacting your end results, right? So you're adding maybe additional steps that they didn't do before because of how this whole Gen AI environment operates, right? But overall, as long as a person has a willingness to learn, experiment, or you enable the environments to where people can learn and experiment, you may already have you already may have people that can do this type of engagement. Again, folks, I'm just taking the 10 years, the 8 years of my technical experience, applying everything I learned in the last 2 years of generative AI in terms of technology, capabilities, frameworks, terms, limitations, right? I didn't start from scratch. I was able to kind of maintain what I already have, and I'm just adding on to it with Gen AI. So in terms of teams, right, this is an exact actual team breakdown of a Gen AI project I did at a Fortune 500 company, right? So overall, it consisted of 5 people, right? Cloud engineer, data scientist, project manager, software developer, and prompt engineer. Right? I provided a little snippets of what they each did, right? Also, with the team, we had, our sponsor and team. The team being, we were working with our sponsor, our project owner, and a marketing guy, and a senior cloud engineer, right? And this was the team dynamics. However, right, if you look at the dots that I added, it shows you that some people did multiple things, right? So in a perfect world, 5 people would be great. However, we operated in a team of 3. Everything you're seeing in red is what I did as my responsibility. And the thing is, because again, this was new and it's still new and it's evolving, where does a line end when you are a cloud engineer versus a Gen AI engineer if you're kind of doing the same thing, right? Where does the line cross between data scientists understanding what RAG is, as well as a software developer that needs to understand the mechanisms of how RAG operates so that it can configure the processes to give you the desired results, right? So it was definitely a trial by fire. If you can get the people, that would be awesome. But I know fewer is better in some organizations, but it is possible. But do note that this engagement was very intensive, right? It was a time where uh, we had limitations on how much information you can submit to a large language model. Well, guess what? That problem doesn't really exist anymore, right? We only had like a 400, 300 token limit. This is like Llama 1 and some other models that we were testing. And we were kind of trying to MacGyver it in a way where we can still give it more information, but not cause the platform to error out, right? And so fast forward to now, I believe Google's Gemini models has like 500,000 token limit, pretty much like a movie script, I believe, or something like of that caliber, of that degree. So again, technology is constantly evolving, right? This is dynamic structure of the team that we had, right? However, it was really spread across 3 people, and I do hope my teammates in that project are watching, especially the project manager, because I tell you what, best project manager I had, I will tell this guy, I was like, hey man, can you just handle the client and all the administrators so I can just focus on figuring out how to manage the budget for the models that or the infrastructure that we're trying to manage for the Gen AI solutions, to getting the RAG to operate as a data scientist, and then trying to develop the Streamlit application so that people have something to touch, right? And that's kind of like the expectations now as well. So when you go back to your organizations, do keep in mind that they have, they may not realize they have like a certain expectation when you say, oh, we can give you a Gen AI solution. What they're expecting is a user interface prompt where they can put information in and get a response. It's going through a paradigm shift now of what that looks like. If folks have been tracking, like it's kind of going away from that a little bit, but it's still the thing that everyone knows. Insert ChatGPT, Gemini. It does. They're looking for something interactive. Yes. Question.
Yep, Matt again. So as a technologist, what do you think's the happy medium for project managers on technical projects to have expertise of the actual project at hand? I think it can be a slippery slope because if they have too much expertise, then they
Mhm.
can try to sway things to a different direction than what your intent is. But if they don't have enough, maybe there's something lost in translation there, and that can be a hindrance. So, could you kind of describe what you think's the happy medium there?
Yes, no, definitely can. I operate off of the trust and verify approach as a project manager, right? I rely on my teammates to inform me so that I can inform the stakeholders. But it's also on the project manager's responsibilities to understand what these terminologies are and what these technologies means to your sponsor and stakeholder, right? They're going to ask you blatantly, hey, can you explain to me RAG, right? I keep hearing it, but I don't know what that means, you guys. Can you please explain that to me? Or what do you mean by Kendra? Like, what's the purpose of that? So it is just finding that building that trust within your own team to where you have folks that can get you those answers from a technical landscape. They're, to a degree, they're your advisors. However, you as the project manager still need to be able to transform that information into business language so that your sponsor and your product owner have an idea, a better picture of what that means. It's one of those things it's hard to describe, but I know what needs to be done. And part of what needs to be done is having that reliance and confidence that your team is gaining that knowledge, but you're also gaining that knowledge as well. And your knowledge is being able to speak tech to non-tech people, right? Because usually that's what the project manager is most often doing at times. At the same time, well, you were mentioning they can go off the rails. Well, that depends, right? And I actually can segue it into the next slide that kind of talks about why even going off the rails can be not even feasible for the most part. But ideally, what's going to prevent going off the rails is going to be cost. I think now people are realizing generative AI is very expensive. And sometimes when people say, oh, let's build a model, they have no clue what that really means. And I'm definitely going to talk about that in the next slide. But overall, uh, it's just having that initiative to really just diving deep into the domain. Every major cloud provider has free Gen AI training, right? I try to share as much as I can courses that may be more beneficial to project managers versus my technical folks, right? Hence the Kaggle and the white papers and some of the exercises. It's tech, but at the same time, they really kind of go give you a general overview of all those concepts. Hopefully that gives you an idea, Matt, or a clue in terms of finding that balance between wanting something at the farther extreme versus not knowing enough, and just navigating, pretty much going back up to that like happy medium where you're not too deep, but you still have enough depth to where you can still have conversations with people.
Yep, definitely. Thank you.
So overall, folks, this is the team. Um, a very simple team that can consist of working on a generative AI project. Obviously, it just depends on what they're looking for in scope, deliverables, et cetera, et cetera. Um, 3 people is a lot. So I will caution that 3 people is a lot. And the fact that a lot of us were seasoned developers and project managers. So it made it work. Hence, I was able to rely on my project manager to be like, hey, just get the sponsor and the project owner off my back so I can focus on the work that I need to get done. So I'm a big fan of project managers, if y'all didn't know. So when we talk about, or when people say, you know what, let's build a model. I do think, I believe that people really don't know what that means, right? Overall, there is like 3 phases to consider when you want to approach that that endeavor. At the very beginning, right? So as a starting point for you for your use cases, this is why I go over this. I'm going over this process is to kind of give you an idea. Okay, I know my use cases. I have my team, but how go about thinking of actually using the technology? Well, there's 3 general overarching phases. When it comes to building a model, right? So be careful when they say building a model. Really pull the strings, excuse me, on what that means at the very basic level where all people should start at is just leveraging pre-trained models. Do you have access to OpenAI, ChatGPT API, right? Where you can submit a request over the internet and it'll give you something back, right? Do you have an AWS or Azure environment where they already have a collection of models available within their environment for you to download and test drive and use, right? Why rebuild a model or build a model equivalent to a company like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Meta, Google, where they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to create? Why would you want to even create that, right? A great way to get started proving proof of concepts, prototypes. It's leveraging pre-trained models. However, that's not enough, right? As we all know, well, it isn't trained on your data, so it can't really give you much on your organization to give your clients, your customers, your consumers a better answer response. You have little intermediate steps in between before you get to fine-tuned. First one is prompt engineering. Now you're looking at getting data. Now it's imperative that you understand where your data is, if that's the route that you're going to. Or I would recommend that is the first route you go to, because it does start the data finding process. I've seen clients spend an enormous amount on data hunters. Data hunters are people where, hey, go find this data that I thought I said I knew existed but didn't, and ask everybody if they have it, right? Definitely, that is a great way to kind of save on costs, especially from an organizational perspective. Hiring external people is to definitely hone in on their data, right? So prompt engineering is one. The next is then enhancing it through the RAG framework, where you're referencing information and using your model and is generating a response. The other one is hyperparameter tuning. It's adjusting the levers within your model that were used to create the initial initial model itself, right? Have yet to come across that need yet. Most of my time, prompt engineering and RAG tend to work very efficiently. Then, if none of that works for you, right, this is where you really need to take into consideration, okay, do we want to create a fine-tuned model? Meaning you're taking a model and having it retrained a little bit, not the whole thing, just a little bit on very specific things within your organization so that it can really give you more definitive responses with minimal hallucinations and things of that nature, right? I haven't gotten to that level yet, or I should rephrase it, I haven't had a client want that because of the cost. Now, when somebody says build a model and they're literally meaning build it from scratch, that's something you really need to do a cost benefit analysis for, right? Because a lot of energy goes into that. You can easily blow your entire budget in 1 week. Just to kind of hit that home, right? Bloomberg GPT took 53 days to complete. And this was a couple months. This details a couple months old. I'm pretty sure they've refined their process, but first go around about 53 days. That's assuming that everything went well, right? I haven't seen a report where it stated all the nuances and lessons learned, but that's 53 days. All right, well, Henry, what's 53 days? Well, that's why I added the other key bit of information. So running one A10 GPU for 10 hours runs you about $175 a day. That's just one GPU or your graphics cards. It has to leverage these graphic cards, or it'll take even an enormous amount of time to complete your large language models, right? So definitely think through what is being asked when somebody says, "Oh, let's build a model," right? Well, do they have the budget for it? Right? Is the expected gains equate? Is the expected gains of what you're saving in or creating revenue exceed that of what you need to spend? Okay, then go have at it. Go ham on that approach. If not, then you really need to take a step back. And like I mentioned before, at the pre-train level, you're talking about Llama 3, Chat GPT, models that I can only imagine how much they spent just to create that. And I think Meta has stated they bought like 200, either 200, 2,000 GPUs. Each GPU is costing like 10 grand or something of the sort. And it's an enormous amount of funding just to make sure it can create higher, better tier models. And I believe the A100 is the cheaper one. I think it's like there's a H100, which is like the newer one, right? So even then, and this is just a rough estimate looking at what Google charges Azure and AWS, and it seemed to be like at 175 range. So this, is going back or alluding to the, let's see if it actually shows it. This is alluding back to how technology has advanced, right? So because of the need for generative AI, they've really pushed new technologies to support it, to be better at creating prompts and things of that nature, right? So the project I showed you with a team, that was like roughly a little over 3 months, 4 months, almost 5 months, I believe, with data, discovery, all that stuff. This application I built in just a few days, right? Because of how technology has improved, right? Where I'm able to feed it a model, feed it the data, and create an interface where I can ask questions against it. And it's just showing you fictitious information, folks, of me needing to find people. Let's say if you're a project manager, need to find somebody that meets certain skill sets for a proposed engagement. Having your resume be accessible for your model is a great help. So it's just asking questions against it so that I know who maybe I need to tag on said proposal or project, right? And giving you your best fit. Other ways that you can use this, if like let's say you're using this for proposals, right? You need to you need to submit your best 3 proposals. Well, if you have a catalog of all that information, you can ask like, hey, given the criteria, what proposals fulfill this? Okay, of the 10, give me the top 3 with the most earliest one that you can find, and it'll list you your top 3 that it would consider as your best contenders, right? Obviously, I am bypassing the testing, the ability to confirm that it is accurate, right? Obviously, I'm not assuming that it's just a snap of a finger. However, being able to create this so much faster than what I was able to do back then just speaks volumes to how fast and how much technology is improving and changing. And I know we're almost at time, so I'll try to breeze by this one. And this is like the last section, folks. Don't forget adoption management and maintenance, right? Because people need to be trained on this stuff. There was a podcast from Microsoft where they acknowledged that one of their biggest earliest mistakes with Copilot was having it accessible to their employees. soon they realized that, guess what, their employees didn't know how to really use it. And so they had to kind of go back and rework a plan. So when it comes to adoption management, training is required, right? The people's aptitude to learn new things varies from person to person. And again, it's going back to meeting where people are at and getting them all to the same playing field, right? So it's important to discuss, how inputs impacts your outputs, right? How being clear, provided guided references, or providing references to use will determine how great your final output would be. Other things to also take in consideration is supporting the reinforced learning human feedback capability. So if anybody uses ChatGPT or Gemini, you'll see that when you, after you have it, give it a response, it'll ask you like, hey, was this a good yes or no, right? People like actually clicking on that button will better make that model operate efficiently down the road, right? So teaching employees to actively participate in that. Also limitations, right? And concerns, right? What is an employee not able to ask? How is it preventing PII, HIPAA from being accessible from others, right? It's really providing that reassurance. And some technology providers, if you've been attending a lot of these conferences, I'll be surprised if you can in the chat list who it is. But I tell you what, almost every conference, every engagement, they start with, we do not have access to your model. We do not have access to your data. You have full control, and you have to actually give us permission to help you. If you don't know your password, then you're SOL, right? Because there's just a lot of concerns when it comes to what it can do if folks are not careful with access and controls and permissions, right? So it's very imperative that you really give that assurance on top of just training employees, but giving that reassurance that they are okay, that their information is still being safeguarded, and that there are guardrails in place to ensure that nothing happens to their data. And then the second thing is maintenance, right? So this is a pivotal point where project managers need to determine whether they want to continue with this proof of concept or not, right? Because there is a cost associated to the resources you have. I mentioned before on the GPU cost, that's by how long it is available per hour, just available, not that you're using it, just available per hour, right? You definitely don't want to just have things running at the highest tier, because then you'd be doing you'd be causing unrequired expenses. So budget monitoring is very key. It doesn't just stop the moment the project ends. What about the model update, right? Based on just a little quick research I did 2 days ago, on average, and this is looking at OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, you're looking at every 6 to 12 months, there is a new model that is being created or updated based upon what you had before, right? So what does that mean to you? Is that going to change how you do things? Because if you look at the demo I provided for you, oh heck yeah, I would scrap everything I did and replace it with something like that, because it's now getting more efficient in creating these type of user interfaces that incorporate generative AI flair to it, right? Frameworks, right? We went from simple RAG to now agents, right? What does that mean? Does it need it, right? I'm not saying to go overboard on that. It is more so forward thinking on what are some potential opportunities to think about when it comes to how the landscape is changing for the most part. And with that, folks, that wraps it up. We have a few minutes. I can stay a little longer if folks need it. I don't know how folks want to do it, but anybody have any initial comments, questions, concerns, anything they want to ask? Not all at once, folks. Not all at once. I know, lunchtime, hopefully, people were munching while they were off camera. Well, folks, if you have nothing for me, I have nothing for you. I want to say thank you for this opportunity for Matt's and the local PMI chapter here in Montgomery County Definitely thank you for the opportunity to share this knowledge with you all. I'm a firm believer of sharing is caring, also helping folks avoid some of the major pitfalls and things to consider, and to ease the stress that, guess what, folks, everyone is on the same playing field, right? You're not the only one. And so I'm just here sharing what I've gone through. Hopefully it was of value, from how to create use cases to design things. So for those folks that are in the design thinking phase, this is money for you guys right now. Definitely a lean in on that. For technical project managers, right? If, as long as somebody has the willingness to learn, and they have those just key things like basic programming languages, fundamentals of architecting, they can build Gen AI solutions, right? So it's just a matter of going through the motions, how to, having to learn how to ride a bike for the first time. But after that, you get used to it, right? With that, folks, this is my social media. Please feel free to reach out, ask any comments or questions offline if you're happy to. And have a rest of your day and weekend and Thanksgiving.
Yep. And on behalf of the chapter, thank you very much for all our attendees who hung out with us during this lunch period. Henry's one of those personalities that his zest for knowledge and giving back to the communities is contagious and makes you want to learn more. So hopefully, you, along with me, are excited to tap our toe into a few of these things. Henry's a great follow on LinkedIn. He posts a lot of information and to start to get conversation going on within his network. And he also has a lot of intriguing content on Medium, which is a freelance publication site where he has a lot of good articles on this content. And we look forward to continuing to have you be a friend of the chapter, sir. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Everyone, enjoy your weekend and the holiday week ahead and finish up the day strong.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.